Hello and welcome to my first video where I discuss a specific build that I think is good and that people should build. I'm going to be basing a lot of the structure and the thinking on the video that I put out a couple days ago about how to design your own builds. So if you haven't watched that one yet, I'll link it in the description. Go back and watch that. It'll talk about not just the kind of thought process that I went into making this, but how to design your own build similar to this or how to improve on this one. After posting that, I was very pleasantly surprised when one YouTube commenter specifically nailed exactly the build that I wanted to talk about today. So shout out to ConverseFall, who said that he was inspired by that video to build 6 Blademaster with kassadin, which is exactly the build that we'll be talking about today. So this is a build that I think is really good in 10.6, but I named the video about 10.7 because while it's good now, I think that 10.7, it'll be amazing. So I would practice this build now in preparation for that patch that's coming up. But before we go into why it'll be so good in 10.7, I want to go over some things with the build. From the structure that we did yesterday, so the things that we want to know are what are the core concepts of the build, what items do we need, what can it transition out of, and then the tempo of the build, when it's strong or weak, when do you save, reroll, when do you level, etc. So the core concept of the build is a pretty straightforward one. It's 6 Blademaster, and we're adding in kassadin as the 7th unit. The reason that we want kassadin in addition to the 6 Blademasters is mostly for Celestial. So when you have these Blademasters, one of their big weaknesses is that they're very fragile units. Other than Shen, you don't really have any very defensively minded Blademasters. They're pretty much all damage all the time, and they output a lot of damage. What kassadin gives is AoE crowd control. It gives them another frontliner for Xayah and Kale to sit behind, and it gives everyone 15% health restore on every single thing. So the core concept of this is going to be that it lets you build your carries a lot more offensively because they're already going to be getting their health regen just from the Celestial trait. As far as items, there are a few that are really, really important. I put the Infinity Edge on Aurelia. Basically, the idea is that your first item is Infinity Edge, your second item is Infinity Edge, and your third item is Infinity Edge. In most Aurelia-based builds, what you're going to see is you get one IE and then something like a Bloodthirster and then a GA. So basically one fully offensive item and then 2 more hybrid or more defensive items. What you get to do because of the 6 Blademaster 2 Celestial is you can build Aurelia full glass cannon because her damage items are going to be compounded by the 6 Blademaster trait. And then the more damage she deals, the more damage she's going to heal back with the Celestial trait. So the IEs really stack multiplicatively because the way that crit works in this game and that IEs work is that Aurelia dashes in and she has a chance to crit on that attack. Base, that's going to be 25%. If you add one IE, 45%, then 65%, and then 85%. And every IE makes the damage more and more. And then with Blademaster, every attack you get has a 55% chance to have 3 attacks instead of just 1. So if you have the dream scenario of 3 Infinity Edges on Aurelia, basically she's just going to one-shot something, heal a ton of health, and keep dashing around the map to unit after unit, basically no matter the health, because even if she doesn't crit it on the first one, she's going to attack again and crit it on the second one, chances are. The other item that is really, really crucial is going to be the rapid fire cannon on Kale. And this is important for Kale, not just obviously because of the attack speed, but because of the positioning that it lets you do. So if you don't have rapid fire on Kale, you have to position Kale further up close to all of this. And what that does is AoE stuff that hits your front line has a chance of hitting Kale. Say that you have a gangplank or something that you're playing against. You might have seen a gangplank or two in your games. And so if Kale is closer, then Kale is probably going to be hit by that gangplank. So there are scenarios where you don't even need a defensive item on your main carry because of the positioning that allows you to do. As far as other items, basically any AP item you're going to want to put on Kale. Obviously, it's unrealistic that you can get nothing but IEs for Aurelia, so just stack a bunch of sword-based items on her, whatever you can get. If you get anything tanky, then you can put it on one of these guys. I would say that probably putting it on Yi, maybe Kassadin is the best. Actually, probably Kassadin, because the longer he survives, the more AoE disables that he can get off. One item that I want to note specifically, I thought that Hurricane would be insane with Kale because the extra attack would have more splashes. This does not work. Do not make a Hurricane on Kale. In terms of what this build transitions out of, you're going to go to 3 Blademaster pretty fast, and your important Blademaster is going to be Xayah. So your other Blademasters are frontliners, so they can't just sit there auto-attacking all day. So you're gonna have a team comp that looks something like this. Doesn't matter exactly what. Is this Jarvan? That dude looks like Aatrox. Anyway, the important early game item to get for Xayah is going to be Static Shiv. And this item is not one that is super good late game, but it's so ridiculously strong in the early game that I still really recommend it. So what it does is, first of all, it lets Xayah have a little bit of mana to get closer to casting her spell that much sooner. And then as soon as she does cast her spell, she attacks very, very quickly. And then she spreads magic damage through the entire enemy team. She'll end up doing as much or more magic damage than physical damage. This is really important, especially from Blademasters in the early game, because people are going to have 2, sometimes even 4 vanguards in their early compositions. And when stuff has, 120 armor, you're not just going to want to hit it with a ranged AD only auto attack over and over because you won't deal any damage. As soon as you get Shiv on Xayah, that is a huge power spike, and you're going to be able to snowball and win streak as soon as you get that Shiv on a 2-star Xayah. You're also going to be wanting to put if you build, say, a rapid fire cannon, you can put that on Xayah. The IE and other stuff like that, you can put it on either the Xayah or on Fiora if you want, as long as you are comfortable selling that unit and replacing it with the same one later on. Similar to how in Rebels, you build up your Yasuo and your Ziggs, and then sell those to move the items over to GP and Aurelian Soul, respectively. So, as far as the tempo of the build, what you're going to be doing is focusing on a level 7. So this is 7 units right here. So what I would do is at level 5, if you're really weak and you have that Static Shiv online, you can use a little bit of money re-rolling to have just 2 stars of these. We're not doing a hyper roll build here, but you're mostly going to be wanting to save until level 7 and then rolling down just to 50 gold at 7 so that you can find your Kale and your Aurelia and the other units as necessary. As far as when you're strong, when you're weak, pretty much you're going to be weak, really, really weak early until you get Static Shiv, and then later on you're going to hit a power spike as soon as you find one Kale, as long as you have one decent item to give to her, whether that's Rapid Fire Cannon, Morellonomicon, something like that. So because it is a ranged carry, as soon as you find the Kale, I would pretty much go, not all in, but go to level 6 or level 7 as soon as you get that, so that you can win streak off the back of a Kale. As soon as you get Kale with 1 or 2 items, Kale is going to be leading your team in damage. As far as when you save and when you reroll, you're not going to want to go below 50 gold at level 7, but if you need to find an Aurelia or a Kale level 2, then you can go a little bit below that if it's important to maintain a win streak. And then after you do that, Your level 8 and 9 are going to be adding Misfortune so that you have Valkyrie with Kale, and then Echo so that you have Cybernetic with Aurelia, Echo, and Fiora. This is 6 out of the 7 Blademasters. So if, for example, you had 2-star of Yasuo and Yi, but you didn't have Fiora and you had sold that, then you don't have to go Cybernetic. You can do something else instead in the late game. For example, a Jinx or something along those lines, so that you can have 3 Rebel and then Jinx with MF makes Blaster. So in terms of any backups or any alternate versions of this build, so say that you're going through this and you are going into the build comfortably, but then you're just not getting your items. You're not getting your swords, you're not getting your whatever is it Brawler's Greaves, whatever the crit one is, and you're not getting any bows, because this build does require a lot of swords, a lot of bows. So there is a backup that you can do. This is more theoretical, but it should be good. So basically you're gonna, you can build Yi, a 3-star Yi, kind of as though he's a Xin Zhao. So if you build him tank, then what he's going to be doing is regenerating a ton of HP, not dying, while still zooming around the map and dealing true damage. And so then until you find the Aurelia, or in addition to the Aurelia, you can build around this and just stack defensive items here. You can also stack defensive items on your kassadin, but if you're not finding the Aurelia at all, I would recommend doing this 3 Rebel package with the Yi. So in terms of the 10.7 changes and why I think that this build is going to be so strong in 10.7. So the first thing is that a lot of other builds are getting nerfed, of course, in 10.7. So a lot of 5 costs. I think every 5 cost but Thresh is going to be taking a hit in 10.7. Now, what does that do? Well, it makes the 4 cost carries relatively better. So we're talking Kale, we're talking Aurelia. And then in addition to that, pretty much everything that you see is also getting a buff in 10.7. So Xayah and Kassadin are getting direct buffs. Blademaster itself is getting a direct buff. Instead of 55% chance to triple strike, it's going to be 60%. So basically a 10% increase, 10% chance increase from 50 to 55. Yes, that math works, for hitting multiple times, which will really increase your DPS. Then for your early game, Static Shiv is also getting a buff in 10.7. So your early game is going to be even better with Static Shiv based on that. But that is not to say that in terms of 10.6 that this build is currently bad though. So one advantage that it has that I haven't mentioned at all is this Mana Reaver. So as you can see here from the positioning, I position these guys on the outside because chances are if they're facing down a Gangplank or a Cho'Gath or something like that, this is where it's going to be. And you don't want these guys to auto attack the same melee target so that they have maximum spread for their Mana Reaver ability. Then in 10.7, this is going to get even better because what they're doing to Mana Reaver is they're giving what is currently the Mana Reaver 4 buff to Mana Reaver 2. So in 10.7, every single Aurelia auto attack, which includes her spell, is going to have the Mana Reaver ability. This is fucking ridiculous. I don't know how Aurelia just won't be insanely broken with that. While I'm on the subject of positioning, you notice here that I have these guys off to the side. Basically, this is insurance against one specific unit, that unit, of course, being Blitzcrank. So if I've done this correctly, every single position that Blitz can fire a hook from will hit either Fiora or Xayah, who at this point in the game, I do not give a single shit about. If it's back middle, it'll hit Fiora. If it's to the left, Xayah, etc. And then similarly in early game, I have this formation that I do with pretty much every composition. You can think of this as like a diamond, or I think of it as a little UFO, where you make this so that your melee carries are 1 row back off to the side 2 off from your ADC or your ranged carry, who is 2 rows back from here. And this again gives you protection against Blitzcrank and some incidental protection against other stuff. The only positioning that this is weak against is going to be infiltrators. So if it's late game and they're running infiltrators, then I would scout and I would try to move Kale to a corner. Same thing against Gangplank. They're later in the game, they're going to have the larger area buff. And if they larger area attack someone at the front line, it might hit Kale, who's back here. So scout them and see if there's no Blitzcrank, then you can move the Kale over here so you can hit here. Basically, what you want Kale to be doing is splashing attacks onto their entire team, because the splash goes behind the target that it hits, similar to Titanic Hydra in set 1. I think they removed it in set 2. Anyway, it's a favorite item of mine. But especially with Morellos, you really want to splash onto their entire Rebel clump or whatever else they're doing with their team, but especially Rebels. Finally, about this build, kind of why it's really good right now and will get even better, is that this is pretty much the highest damage composition that you can be doing. There are other teams that have a lot more disruption. In fact, this one is pretty weak on disruption. But in terms of pure DPS, it's really hard to beat itemized Aurelia and itemized Kale. And with these the dual carry, both frontline and backline carry, most team comps are going to have a really, really difficult time both disrupting the Aurelia that's bouncing around their carries while also getting someone to the Kale to beat that. If they only send like 1 or 2 infiltrators, chances are Kale can just kill them and go to the rest of their team. But a lot of the time, Kale is going to be splashing damage on their entire team while Aurelia bounces around with the Infinity Edges, and everyone that's finished off because of that Morellos or because of just the raw damage from Kale is going to make those resets even easier. So that's the build. Thank you all so much for watching. I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I realize that this is pretty low fidelity video right now. I'm just recording this on a laptop. What I'm going to be doing, if the numbers from YouTube are encouraging in terms of subscribers and it looks like I'm going to be monetized, I am going to be buying a brand new gaming computer, because my current gaming computer is in it's in a storage unit in Seattle. But I'm really excited to start streaming again. So I hate to be the like and subscribe guy, but it really, really would be important to me if I could get monetized for this so that I can keep making these videos. I hope this has been really helpful, really informative. Please don't take this as set in stone or don't take this as gospel. Please play around with different variants. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that, say, Yi is garbage and there's another one that's better for building around, or if you think, for example, that actually the units to build around in this are going to be kassadin or something like that. Try it out, use those principles that I showed you in the last video, and let me know how it goes. Thank you so much.